Hi everyone, welcome to a new Think Socio video. In this video, we'll be discussing Plus One Sociology PYQs from chapters 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 3, Understanding Social Institutions. First question, explain the functionalist and conflict perspective on education. It's a three-marker question. So, according to the functionalists, education maintains and renews the social structure, transmits and develops culture. It is an important mechanism for the selection and allocation of individuals in their future roles in society. It is also a ground for proving one's ability, and hence it acts as an selective agency for different status according to their abilities. Conflict theorists, on the other hand, says that education functions as a main stratifying agent. The inequality of educational opportunity is also considered as a product of social stratification. Some argue that schooling intensifies the existing divide between the elite and the masses. Briefly explain different forms of marriage. According to number of partners, marriages could be monogamous or polygamous. Monogamy is having one spouse at a time. Polygamy is marriage to more than one mate at one time. And in polygamy, it can be either polygyny or polyandry. Polygyny is when one husband has two or more wives, and polyandry is when one wife has two or more husbands. According to rule of eligibility, marriages could be endogamous or exogamous. Endogamy requires an individual to marry within a culturally defined group of which he or she is already a member. Exogamy, on the other hand, requires the individual to marry outside of his or her own group. Explain functionalist perspective on family. According to functionalists, family performs certain important tasks that contributes to society's basic needs and also helps perpetuate social order. It helps in specialization of roles of husbands adopting the instrumental role as breadwinners and wife assuming the effective or emotional role in domestic settings. Other important tasks that family does include socialization of children, emotional support and stability, regulation of sexual behavior and reproduction, and economic support and division of labor. List any two features of modern form of work. This is a two-marker question, and we point out two features of modern work. First one, highly complex division of labor, and secondly, there has been a shift in the location of work. The location has shifted to factories, and there is higher economic interdependence between various actors involved in work. Fifth question, in India, families are gendered. Substantiate this statement with suitable examples. This statement reflects how the gender roles, expectations, and power dynamics are deeply embedded within the Indian family structure. There is a gender division of labor in the family. Women are primarily responsible for household chores, caregiving, and child rearing, even when they are employed. There exists a son preference and patriarchal family structure where we see examples of female infanticide and feticide happening because of the son preference. In marriage, also, there are gendered expectations for the women to move their residence, and we always see news of violence and control over women's mobility, etc., which again shows how families are gendered in the Indian context. Analyze the influence of religion on economic behavior with the help of an example. To explain this, we can look at Max Weber's pioneering work, Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. In his work, he argues that Calvinism, which is a branch of Protestant Christianity, exerted an important influence on the emergence and growth of capitalism as a mode of economic organization. How did it happen? Calvinism believes that all acts are done for the glory of God, and that way work become acts of worship. They believe in predestination, that heaven or hell is already preordained. So how do people on earth be happy with themselves? They look for signs of God's happiness and will in their occupation, in their day to day lives. So, success and consistency in work was considered to be God's happiness. They believed in frugal living, and investment became a holy creed to them. Investment is the heart of capitalism. And that is how Calvinism actually led to economic development. And this explains how religion can have an effect on economic behavior. Describe the various forms of family. According to the number of people living, families can be nuclear or joint. According to rule of residence, families can be matrilocal or patrilocal. Matrilocal is when newly married couple stays with the woman's parents, and patrilocal when the couple lives with the man's parents. According to authority and dominance, there could be matriarchal and patriarchal families. Matriarchal is where women exercise the decision making power, and patriarchal where men exercise decision making power. According to rules of inheritance, there could be matrilineal or patrilineal families. Matrilineal family is when property is passed down from mother to daughter, and patrilineal when property is passed down from father to son. Eighth question. Distinguish between the sociological study of religion and the theological study of religion. In theological study of religion, it is faith based and doctrinal, and it involves scripture interpretation, doctrinal analysis, and philosophical reasoning. The objective is to deepen understanding and faith in religious teachings. The sociological study of religion, on the other hand, conducts empirical studies of how religions actually function in society and how it is related to other institutions. It uses a comparative method and investigates religious beliefs, practices, and institutions in relation to other aspects of society and culture. Define serial monogamy. Engaging in a series of monogamous relationships, one after another, is called serial monogamy. Individuals are permitted to marry again, often on the death of the first spouse or after divorce, but they cannot have more than one spouse at one and the same time. Such monogamous marriages are termed serial monogamy. 10th question. Evaluate the views of Emil Durkheim and Max Weber on religion. Emil Durkheim looked at the sacred realm of religion. He distinguished between sacred and profane. Sacred involve objects, beliefs, practices that are considered holy or supernatural, and the profane is the everyday secular life. He also looked at religion as a source of social solidarity, that rituals reinforce social cohesion. His major work include the elementary forms of religious life. Max Weber analyzed how religious beliefs, particularly Calvinism, influenced the rise of capitalism. He says that Protestant work ethic, which values hard work, discipline, and frugality, helped shape modern economic behavior. He says that religion can drive social transformations, shape economic and political structures. His major work include The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Write any three characteristics of religion. Three important characteristics that all religions seem to share are a set of symbols invoking feelings of reverence or awe, rituals or ceremonies, which includes praying, chanting, singing, eating, etc., and thirdly, a community of believers. Chapter 4. Culture and Socialization. First question. Do you agree that mass media is an important agent of adolescent socialization process? Substantiate your view. Yes, I do agree that mass media is an important agent of adolescent socialization process. Firstly, mass media includes electronic, print, and digital media as well. And there is transmission of cultural norms and values through this media. They shape identity and self-perception of the adolescents. They help in development of social skills, gives exposure to diverse perspectives, and also keeps them socially and politically aware. Briefly explain the three dimensions of culture. The three dimensions of culture are cognitive, normative, and material. Cognitive culture refers to how we learn to process the information, what we hear or see, to give it a meaning. An example would be identifying the ring of our cell phone. Normative culture, on the other hand, refers to the rules of conduct, the rules we follow in our day to day life, like not opening other people's letters, performing certain rituals, touching an elder's feet. All these would be part of normative culture. Material culture, on the other hand, includes any activity made possible by means of material. This could be tools or machines, etc. Examples would be chatting in the internet and even putting column on our floors with rice flour. So, this would become part of material culture. Culture is not a finished product. Evaluate this statement and find its connection with cosmopolitanism. This statement suggests that culture is dynamic, continuously evolving, and is shaped by political, social, and economic changes. Rather than being a static entity, culture is fluid, it is adapting to new influences and global interactions. Cosmopolitanism values other cultures for their difference. It celebrates and accommodates different cultural propensities within its fold, and it promotes cultural exchange and borrowing to enrich one's own culture. And that is how we can connect cosmopolitanism, the idea, with culture not being a finished product as it leads to culture evolving. Distinguish between ethnocentrism and cosmopolitanism with suitable examples. Ethnocentrism is the application of one's own cultural values in evaluating the behavior and beliefs of people from other cultures. The cultural values projected as the standard or norm are considered superior. There is a sense of cultural superiority. Example would be the colonial attitudes and stereotypes we have towards certain regions. Cosmopolitanism values other cultures for their difference. It does not seek to evaluate the values and beliefs of other people according to one's own culture, and it celebrates and accommodates the differences and promotes cultural exchange and borrowings to enrich one's own culture. Example would be language adaptations, fusion of cuisines, etc. Give any three reasons for cultural change. Cultural change is the way in which societies change their patterns of culture, and the impetus for this change can be internal or external. Example of an internal impetus would be a change in the method of farming, which could increase agricultural production and thereby improve the quality of life. An example of an external impetus would be colonization, contact with other cultures, and can lead to processes of adaptation. Revolutionary changes in culture can happen through political intervention, technological innovations, and ecological transformations. Chapter 5, Research Methods in Sociology. Objectivity is more complicated in the study of sociology. Substantiate with reasons. This is because social scientists are studying the world in which they themselves live. So there is a chance of bias, which is the influence of the attitudes about something in their own past or present social environment. Even when they try to be self reflexive, there is a chance for an unconscious bias. Other reasons for objectivity being complicated in sociology include the presence of various versions of truth in the social world. There are multiple points of view in social sciences themselves. Sociology is known as a multi paradigmatic science, and there are competing and mutually incompatible schools of thought coexisting within the discipline. And that is why objectivity is a process and not an end result. Define sample survey. Explain the principles of sample selection. A sample survey is a research method used to collect data from a subset or sample of a larger population to make inferences about the whole population. Instead of surveying every individual, researchers select a representative sample to save time, effort, and resources while ensuring reliable results. What are the principles of sample selection? Representativeness. All the relevant subgroups in the population should be recognized and represented in the sample. Larger populations are not homogeneous and they have subcategories, and the sample has to reflect the characteristics of the relevant strata. Second principle is randomization. The actual unit, that is, the person or village or household to be studied, should be selected based purely on chance to avoid bias. Differentiate between objectivity and subjectivity. Objectivity is based on facts, impartiality, and external reality. It is neutral, unbiased, and independent of personal feelings. An example would be scientific experiments following a standardized procedure. Subjectivity, on the other hand, is based on personal opinions, individual values, and preferences. It is influenced by personal experiences, beliefs, and interpretations. An example would be a person's opinion on whether a movie is good or not. Examine any three limitations of participant observation. What are its strengths? So, in this answer, we look at the strengths and limitations of participant observation as a research method. Limitations: it is long drawn out, time consuming, and intensive research. Second limitation would be the difficulty to generalize as it covers a very small part, generally a single village or a small community. Third limitation would be the subjectivity or researcher bias, whether we are listening to the anthropologist or the researched. And the fourth limitation would be the relationship between the researcher and the researched. It is a one sided relationship due to social, economic, and political distance. Now, what are the strengths of participant observation? Participant observations gives deep and contextual understanding about the situation, gives rich and in-depth data. It allows for flexibility for the researcher as well as the researched, and it captures natural behavior, also builds trust and rapport with the respondents. Explain sampling and non-sampling errors with an example each. What is sampling error? Sampling error occurs when the selected sample does not perfectly represent the entire population. An example would be to study the average income of households, we are only studying affluent neighborhoods. This would lead to sampling error. Non sampling errors arise due to issues in data collection, processing, or respondent related factors. These errors are not related to sampling method but occur due to human or technical mistakes. An example would be people underreporting cigarette smoking in a health survey due to the social stigma attached to smoking. This can lead to incomplete data, and this is a non sampling error. Critically examine the use of participant observation method in sociology and social anthropology. Anthropologists used to carry out their fieldwork in remote tribal communities. Sociologists, on the other hand, did their fieldwork in all sorts of communities. Sociological fieldwork did not necessarily involve living in the community, but it involved spending most time among the community members. These are some differences in which how fieldwork operated in sociology and social anthropology. Now, critically examining participant observation as a method, we need to understand that when dealing with literate people, the researcher carries a heavy responsibility while doing participant observation. There should be steps taken to minimize the chances of doing any harm, and participant observation as a method has its own strengths and limitations that I earlier described. So you need to bring in both the limitations and strengths of the method while answering this question, since it's an 8 marker question and you are asked to critically examine. So make sure that you write both the strength and limitations of the method and also explain how it has been used in sociology and social anthropology. What is triangulation? Triangulation is the process of reiterating or pinpointing something from different directions. It is the use of multiple methods to bear on the same research problem from different vantage points to produce a much better result. It enhances the validity and reliability of a study. Thanks for listening. See you all in my next video where I'll be discussing more PYQs from Sociology Part 2 book. So, all the best with your preparations meanwhile.